The wind blew dust across the broken fields. The ground was cracked, dry, and lifeless. Once, humans had built homes here, planted crops, raised families. Now only ashes remained. Black smoke curled into the sky. Burnt wood snapped in the wind. A hawk circled high above, calling out over the ruins of the village called Brennavold. Kale stood alone near what had once been his home. His hands were tied with rough rope, his clothes torn, his face bruised. He did not look down at the ashes. He already knew what he would see. Nothing left. Elves in shining silver armor walked nearby. They laughed and spoke in their smooth tongue, one Kale never cared to learn. To them, he was a beast, a thing to be used, not heard, not feared. They had ruled the land for hundreds of years, and humans had been their workers, their servants, their shadows. But something had changed. In the ruins of his home, under a piece of blackened wood, Kale had found something strange. A sharp piece of stone, smooth and cold, but somehow warm at its center. It pulsed in his hand. He had only held it for a second before the soldiers knocked him out. Now it sat hidden, wrapped in cloth and tucked into his boot. He could still feel its heat. One of the elves, tall with pale skin and eyes like ice, stepped toward him. "You are to be taken to Elsurin," he said. "You will face judgment before the court." Kale did not speak. He kept his eyes on the ground, but his mind was far away. Judgment meant death. It always had. Humans did not get trials. They were punished to set an example. A wagon waited at the edge of the road. Kale was pushed into it. The wood creaked as he sat. He looked up, just once, at the sky. Dark clouds rolled in from the east. A storm was coming. Behind him, the burned village stood quiet. Nothing moved but the wind. Inside his boot, the shard grew warmer. Later, as the wagon rolled through the forest paths, Kale watched the trees pass by. He saw the old roads, once built by human hands, now cracked and swallowed by roots. The world had changed. His people had fallen. But he felt something stir deep inside him, something slow and steady, like a drum. He did not know what the stone was. He did not know why it had called to him. But he would not die on Elven soil. Not yet. The road to Elsurin was long and quiet. Tall white trees lined both sides of the path, their leaves silver in the light. Birds did not sing. Even the wind felt cold. Kale sat in the back of the wagon, his hands tied, eyes sharp. The shard in his boot was warm again. It pulsed slowly, like it was waiting. He knew the capital was close. The land grew clean, too clean. Every stone on the road was smooth. Every plant was trimmed. Elves liked order. They feared chaos. Soon, the wagon passed under a tall arch. Carved faces of elven kings stared down from the white stone. Behind them, the towers of Elsurin rose into the clouds. They were smooth and bright, shining with magic. Kale had never seen them up close. They looked like spears made from the sky itself. Guards pulled him out and led him through the city. Elves walked by in fine clothes, eyes full of pride. None looked at him. To them, he was just another human. No one saw the fire in his eyes. They brought him to the Hall of Judgment, a wide room of marble and gold. At the far end, a row of high seats waited. Elven nobles sat there watching. Kale stood in the center of the floor, chains on his wrists. The air smelled of incense and power. A voice spoke, clear, sharp. "You stand accused of defiance, of resisting the will of the High Court. How do you plead?" Kale raised his head. He said nothing. The elf frowned. "Very well. Silence is guilt." The guards stepped forward. One lifted a hand, ready to strike. Then the shard in Kale's boot burned hot. In a blink, a wave of dark light burst from his feet. It cracked the marble floor, sent guards flying. Gasps filled the room. Smoke rose from the ground, curling round his legs. The chains broke. Kale stood free. The room shook. Someone moved through the smoke. A figure in a black cloak, mask hiding the face. They grabbed Kale's arm. "This way," the stranger said. Kale followed without a word. They ran through hidden doors and narrow halls. Guards shouted behind them. Horns blew in the distance. They reached a small gate near the city wall. The stranger pushed it open. Outside, trees waited. Wild, dark, full of sound. "Keep moving," the stranger said. "You're not safe yet." Kale turned. "Who are you?" The stranger pulled off the mask. Sharp eyes, long ears, and dark hair. "An elf, but not like the others." "My name is Varel," she said. "I don't care what you are, but I think you just started a war." Kale followed Varel through the forest. the trees thick around them. Their footsteps were soft, but the air was heavy with the sound of distant horns. The elves were searching for them. They would not stop until they were caught. "We need to move faster," Perel said, her voice steady. "They're already looking for you in the city. We can't stay here." Kel nodded. He didn't speak. The power he had felt in the hall still buzzed in his bones, but it was fading now. The shard in his boot had grown cold again. He felt its weight, but it was no longer burning. It was just waiting. Virel led him to a hidden camp deep in the trees. Small fires burned in the center of tents, but no one spoke above a whisper. Humans and elves both. The camp was a mix of people from different villages, all trying to survive. A man stood up as they approached. He was tall and broad, with a deep scar across his face. "You're the one who caused the chaos in El Siren," the man said, his voice low. Kel nodded. "I didn't mean to, but I couldn't let them kill me." "You could have stayed quiet," the man said, "but you didn't." "It's not just about me," Kel said. "It's about all of us. We've been slaves for too long. We had enough." Virel stepped forward. "He's right. The shard he carries is important. It's not just a weapon. It's a symbol. The elves have ruled over us for too long, and now they're scared. Scared of what we can do if we fight back." Kale looked down at the shard, still cold against his boot. "What exactly is it?" he asked. Virel's eyes were serious. "It's an ancient artifact, one of the first things created when humans and elves were not enemies. Before the elves turned their backs on us. I don't fully understand its power, but I know that it can help us." Kale clenched his fists. "Then let's use it." The man with the scar nodded. "We need to strike fast. The elves won't expect it." "Strike how?" Kale asked. Virel pulled out a map, spread it across a wooden table. "This is a supply route used by the elves to send food and weapons to their soldiers in the north. It's lightly guarded, but if we can hit it hard, we can create chaos." "And what do we do then?" Kale asked. "We'll move quickly," Burrell said. "We'll hit the supply route, then disappear into the woods. We need to send a message. Let them know that we're not just weak humans anymore." Kale stared at the map, his heart pounding. He had never led a fight before. He had always been told what to do, always followed orders. But now, with the shard in his boot and the fire growing inside him, he knew he had no choice. "Let's do it," Kale said. The camp fell silent for a moment. Then the man with the scar spoke. "Tonight, then, we leave before the sun sets." The sun dipped low behind the trees, casting long shadows across the forest. The air was cool, and the wind rustled through the leaves. Kale stood at the edge of the camp, his heart racing. Tonight would be their first strike against the elves. The plan was simple: hit hard, move fast, and disappear. Virel stood beside him, her eyes scanning the map one last time. "We move in 2 groups," she said quietly. "You lead one. I'll lead the other. We hit the supply route at midnight. Don't wait for orders. Move when you see the signal." Kel nodded. "What's the signal?" "Fire," she said, a small smile crossing her face. "We set a few torches along the route. When they light, we go." Kel felt the weight of the shard in his boot again. It was still cold, but he could almost feel it calling to him, urging him forward. He took a deep breath, trying to calm the nerves that were rising in his stomach. He had never led a fight before, but tonight he would. Soon, they were moving through the trees, careful and quiet. The sound of their footsteps was lost in the wind. Ahead, a narrow trail snaked through the woods, marked by old stone pillars. It led to a small clearing where the elves kept their supplies, food, weapons, and tools for their soldiers. The route was well guarded, but with luck, they would be able to hit it without being caught. As they got closer, Kel saw the first torchlight up in the distance. It flickered in the night, a small flame in the dark. That was their signal. Without a word, he nodded to his group. They spread out, moving silently toward the supply route. Kel's heart pounded in his chest as they approached the clearing. The elves were not far. He could hear their voices, low and muffled, coming from behind the crates of supplies. He glanced at the others, a mix of humans and elves who had chosen to fight beside them. They all had the same look in their eyes: determination. He motioned for the others to stay behind him. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped into the clearing, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The elves were still talking, unaware of the danger approaching. Kale's group moved quickly. 2 of his companions rushed forward, knocking over a few crates to make noise. The elves turned, eyes wide in surprise. "Humans!" one of them shouted. "Attack!" The sound of metal clashing filled the air. Kale charged forward, swinging his sword at the nearest elf. The elf raised a shield, but Kale was faster. He twisted his blade, cutting through the elf's defense. The elf staggered back, eyes wide with disbelief. "This is for all of us," Kale whispered, pulling his sword free. The fight was short but fierce. The elves were skilled fighters, but they were not prepared for the chaos that humans brought. The sound of the battle spread through the clearing, but Kale's group was already moving. They grabbed the supplies, throwing them into the trees to slow the elves down. The other group had already lit more torches, signaling the next step. Kale's heart raced as he heard the distant sounds of elves approaching. They had to move quickly now. "To the trees," Pyrell shouted, and Kale followed her into the dark woods. The sound of elves shouting behind them only spurred them on. Kale didn't look back. They had struck their first blow. The moon hung low in the sky as Kale and his group made their way deeper into the forest. The sounds of the battle still echoed in his mind, the clash of metal, the shouts of the elves. But now the forest was quiet, save for the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. It felt strange. The chaos had been brief, but the weight of it was heavy. They had pulled off the raid successfully. The elves were disorganized, confused. They had taken some of their weapons and supplies, causing a small amount of damage. But Kale knew the fight was far from over. The elves would retaliate, and they would do so with anger. The group stopped at a small clearing to rest. The fire crackled as they gathered around it, the light casting long shadows on their faces. Kale sat quietly, his eyes on the ground. The shard in his boot felt cold again, like it was waiting for something. Pyrell sat beside him, her face serious. "You did well tonight," she said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. The elves won't let this go." Kale nodded but didn't speak. He could feel the weight of their situation pressing down on him. They had won a small battle, but they were still outmatched. The elves had power, magic, and years of experience. They had everything. Humans, on the other hand, had only their determination and the shard. He glanced down at the small stone tucked into his boot. It had started to feel important, but he didn't fully understand why. What was its purpose? What did it mean? It had saved him in the Hall of Judgment, but now it felt like it was waiting for something else. "Do you think we can win?" Kale asked, his voice low. Virel looked at him for a long moment before answering. "I don't know, but we can't stop now. If we do, we'll lose everything." The weight of her words hung in the air. Kale had heard the stories, the tales of the elves' power. They were unbeatable, it seemed. Their magic was ancient, their armies endless. What could humans do against that? But what choice did they have? They had been living under the elves' rule for too long, forgotten, pushed to the edges of the world. If they didn't fight now, they would always be slaves. "We can't give up," Kale said finally, his voice steady. "We've already taken the first step. We can't go back." Virel smiled, a small, grim smile. "That's the spirit. We fight or we die." The fire crackled as they sat in silence, each person lost in their thoughts. The night felt endless, but Kale knew it wouldn't last. The elves would come, and they would come with force. The question was, would they be ready? Kale's fingers brushed against the shard in his boot. He didn't know what it was or what it could do, but he felt a strange connection to it, a pull that he couldn't ignore. Perhaps, he thought, it held the answer. Perhaps it was the key to the rebellion. For now, he would hold on to it. Whatever happened next, he would fight. For his people, for freedom. The days after the raid passed in a blur. The group moved quickly through the forest, staying hidden, never staying in one place for too long. The elves were searching for them, and every day felt like a race against time. The small victory had given them some hope, but Kale knew the true battle was just beginning. They gathered in secret locations, planning their next move. The forest was their ally, its thick trees and hidden paths keeping them safe from the elves' eyes. Each night they met by a fire, discussing their plans. Kale sat with Virel and the others, listening carefully as they spoke. "We need more people," Virel said, her voice firm. "This isn't something we can do alone. We need to reach the other villages, get the humans to join us." Kale nodded. The thought of asking others to join the fight made him uneasy. Many humans were still afraid, still loyal to the elves, unsure if they could truly win. It was hard to imagine convincing them to fight. "But how do we reach them?" one of the men asked. "The elves have spies everywhere. If we move too openly, we'll be caught." Virel's eyes flickered. "We won't move openly. We'll use the shadows. There are more like us, people who hate the elves, who want to be free. We need to find them, and we need to move carefully, one village at a time." Kale looked at the map spread out on the table. Small villages were marked in red, places where they could find allies. Each village would be a risk, but without the support of others, they stood no chance. We can't waste time, Kale said, his voice steady. If we wait too long, the elves will come down on us with full force. We need to strike before they're ready. Firel nodded. Exactly. We'll start with the village of Ashwell. It's small, but it has people who've already spoken against the elves. If we can gain their trust, they'll help us reach the others. Kale's hand clenched around the shard hidden in his boot. It still felt cold, though a little warmer now, as if something inside it was waking. He couldn't explain it, but he believed it had a purpose, one that might guide them through the coming war. For now, all he could do was follow. I'll go with a small group, Varel continued. We'll head for Ashwell tonight. Kale, you'll lead the next group. Once we have the people of Ashwell on our side, we'll move to the next village. Kale nodded again. The path ahead was uncertain, but he had no choice. They had already taken the first step. Now there was no turning back. The fire crackled as they finished their plans. The night was growing colder, and the wind carried the scent of rain. Kale looked out into the forest, his thoughts heavy. The storm was coming, and they would be ready. We fight for freedom, he whispered to himself. We fight for everything. The others gathered their things, preparing to leave. The time had come to spread the rebellion, one village at a time. The journey to Ashwell was long. The forest grew denser as they moved, the trees thick and dark. The further they went, the more the air felt heavy, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Kale kept his eyes on the path ahead, his thoughts on the village and the people they hoped would join their cause. They arrived at Ashwell just as the sun began to set. The village was small, nestled between two hills, with cottages made of stone and wood. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the faint sound of children laughing echoed in the distance. At first glance, it seemed like a peaceful place, untouched by the chaos of the world beyond. But Kale knew better. Beneath the surface, fear simmered. The elves ruled the land, and anyone who spoke against them was quickly silenced. Farrell looked at Kale. Stay close. We'll find the ones who are with us. They're here. We just have to find them. Kale nodded and followed her as they made their way into the village. The streets were narrow, lined with simple homes and small shops. People moved about, but there was a quietness to the village, a wariness that Kale could feel in the air. The elves had eyes everywhere. As they walked, a woman approached them. She was older, her hair silvered with age, but her eyes were sharp and bright. You're not from here, she said, her voice low but firm. Virel nodded. No, we're not. We need your help. The woman's eyes flickered, and she glanced around before stepping closer. You're here because you want to fight back, aren't you? Kale's heart raced. This was the moment. If they could win her trust, they could gain a foothold in the village. He stepped forward, his voice steady. Yes, we want to bring down the elves. We've already started, but we can't do it alone. We need people like you. People who aren't afraid to fight for their freedom. The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There are others, but not everyone is ready to rise up. The elves have done their work well. They've made us afraid to act. We don't have time, Kale said, his voice firm. The elves won't wait for us to be ready. They'll come for us, and they'll destroy everything if we don't stand up now. The woman looked past them, as if she could see the threat looming on the horizon. After a moment, she spoke again. Come with me. I'll take you to the others, but you'll need to prove that you're serious, that you can win. They followed her through the village, up a small hill where a group of people were gathered. They looked up as the woman approached, their eyes full of curiosity and caution. These are the ones who might help you, the woman said, her voice steady. But you'll need to show them that this isn't just a dream. You'll need to show them that you can fight, that you can win. Kale stepped forward, his eyes meeting those of the villagers. We've already started. We'd struck against the elves once. We can do it again. There was silence for a moment, then a man spoke. And what makes you think you can win? The elves have magic. They're powerful. We've seen it. We may not have magic, Kale said, his voice strong. But we have each other. We have the will to fight. And we have the shard. The people fell silent at the mention of the shard. It was a symbol, a promise of something greater, something they all needed. After a long pause, the woman who had led them here spoke. Let's see if your fight is worth following. The next morning, the people of Ashwell gathered in the village square. The air was cool, and a light mist hung in the trees. Kale stood at the front, his heart pounding in his chest. He had never been in a position like this before, But now, with the eyes of the villagers on him, he knew there was no turning back. Virel stood beside him, her expression serious. The woman who had led them here, her name was Elira, watched from the edge of the crowd. She had said they would need to prove themselves before the village would fully join the cause. The elves will be watching, Elira had said the night before. They always are. If we show them we are weak, they will crush us. You have to show the people of Ashwell that you can stand against them, no matter what. Kale had no idea how they would prove their strength, but he was determined. The villagers murmured quietly among themselves, uncertain and fearful. It wasn't just the elves they feared, it was failure. If they joined the fight, there was no turning back. Then a sharp cry rang through the air. Elves. The villagers froze, their faces pale. Kale's eyes darted to the hilltop where a few figures were emerging from the trees. Elves, tall, cloaked in dark green, their eyes sharp and dangerous. They had found them sooner than expected. Virel stepped forward, her hand on her blade. "Stay behind us," she said to the villagers, her voice calm but firm. "This is what we've been training for." Kale's pulse raced. The elves were only a handful, but they were trained warriors with powerful magic. They had strength and speed, and Kale knew they could not win in a direct fight. Yet they had no choice. If they didn't show the villagers their courage now, they would lose them forever. The elves spread out across the village square, their eyes scanning every face. The leader, an elf with silver hair, stepped forward. "So, the humans are finally brave enough to show themselves," the elf said in a voice like ice. "Do you think you can defeat us?" Kale stepped forward, his sword at his side. "We don't have to defeat you," he said, his voice steady. "We just have to stand." The elf's gaze hardened, then prepared to fall. With a swift motion, the elf raised his hand. Energy crackled in the air as magic pulsed through his fingers. Kale's heart raced. The villagers were watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Virel moved first, rushing at the elf with speed that took even him by surprise. She struck, her blade clashing with his. The elf was fast, but so was she. Kale watched in awe as she fought with skill and precision. He had to act too. The other elves were moving toward the villagers, clearly planning to strike fear into them. Kale knew he had to stop them. Quickly, he grabbed a wooden spear from a nearby stack and charged toward the second elf. The elf saw him coming and raised his blade to defend. But Kale wasn't aiming for the elf's body. With a quick twist, he threw the spear, aiming for the elf's feet. The elf sidestepped, but Kale was already moving. He closed the distance quickly, grabbing a nearby shield and using it to block the elf's strike. The battle was fierce but short. Virel and Kale worked together, pushing the elves back. Each strike was a challenge, but they were determined to prove they could stand their ground. In the end, the elves retreated, not willing to risk further confrontation. Kale stood, panting, his muscles sore, but his heart filled with pride. They had won. Not with magic, not with strength alone, but with their courage. The villagers watched in silence. One by one, they began to step forward, their faces showing a mix of awe and hope. "You've shown us what we needed to see," Elira said, her voice steady. "We will stand with you."